Sure, I'm set to go. This is fine.
Okay. Okay, I'll start in 2 seconds, Vox. Welcome to the TMRN Time Monk Radio Network. I'm Jules, and tonight is the 4th of February 2011. Today, Clif of halfpasthuman.com is joining us for a roundtable discussion for webbotforum.com. The web forum administrator is Fox, and today he'll be doing the recording and technical support of the show. Several members of the forum were kind enough to join us for tonight's event. They include Webbot moderators Mulder, Bobby, Neo, and members Mam, Sandra, Groundrod, Asetia, and Diane B. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Clif to the Webbot Forum. Hi Clif, how are you going?
I'm doing just fine. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing very well. Thanks for coming in for accepting our interview. It's really good of you to do so.
Sure, yeah, no problem at all.
Great. Okay, Clif's just released his latest Shape of Things to Come report, issue 9 at halfpasthuman.com. Now, I just want to remind folks listening that this discussion is going to be pretty hardcore. Many of the forum members here have been subscribers to Clif's Alter reports, and many have listened to his interviews since 2006, even back to the Mysteries of the Mind days. So if you don't understand some of the questions asked here, please go to halfpasthuman and buy his reports. Also go to YouTube and look up webbotforum.com for a list of his interviews. Hey Clif, have you got the wife preoccupied, dogs locked up, and coffee ready to go?
I have the coffee. The wife is doing email and catching up on that. The dogs are sleeping, so we're fine.
Okay, great. At least for 2 hours anyway.
There we go.
Okay, first question we had, Clif, was we've just passed the tipping point on November 14th and completed the 63-day release period. We've also just passed the Patrick Gerald 87-day cycle date of January 19th. Could you tell us what you expect to occur in the short term over the next 3 or 4 weeks up to the March equinox?
It has to be addressed at a number of different levels. There's the physical level of the planet and its manifestations that we're seeing at the moment with the trined storms. So basically we have a situation where there's 3 storms that are manifesting now on a global fashion in the northern hemisphere and in Australia, and we're seeing the Terra entity cough up that way, and that will continue over these next few weeks up until March, probably 25th, I think. The issue with the Terra entity is that it's kind of a question of when. At some point, it will occur that the solar influences will create a situation here on Earth where there is no cessation of basically superstorm activity during the lull periods between the peaks of the cycle. And so that needs to be clarified. On January 19th was Patrick Gerald's 88-day cycle, so 44 days in would be expected to be the lull. That would be when we should be having spring, which maybe we won't. I don't know that we'll get a spring melt this year, at least not the way that everybody's expecting. It may be oscillation or something along those lines. But at some point we're going to reach this period where there is no cessation, and we'll just have storm after storm after storm. I think it'll start on the cycle that begins on July 15th. It may, however, start on the next cycle, which would be, I think, April 18th or so. So up through spring here, we've got to keep an eye on the weather and make plans accordingly. Because if we're going to get into one of these cycles, then we may not realistically be able to count on a growing period for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. At least not one that's natural. We may have to everybody assume that anything that's going to be grown is going to have to be done so artificially. We look at what's going on with the eastern half of the U.S., with the cyclones in Southeast Asia, and with the extreme cold going all the way down and causing shortages in Southwest. And if this kind of situation continues for a while, we're going to have to sort of sit back for a minute and then make plans accordingly, because sufficient resources will have been involved in the climatic crisis that it will affect everything else. However, now we also have the issue on another level. In the short term, it's going to be more building tension in a rising vertical leaps going to little tiny plateaus and then another vertical leap. So sort of stair-step fashion all the way up to March 25th, and then we'll go into release language until October. Not straight down the way we did these last 63 days, but more of a gradual curve kind of a thing with some crocodile teeth of building tension in there. So between now and March, I expect that global revolution is really going to go. And it's going to cause problems everywhere, and then every day there's going to be some new idiot or other minion that decides to add his 2 cents into it, make it that much worse, and it's going to get even stranger as we go forward.
Just to follow up there, Clif, with this global revolution, and we're starting to see that in Tunisia and Egypt, do you see that escalating to something possibly like a world war?
That's a real issue. World wars are devices of the elite against the masses of the populace. They're designed, they're triggered, they're quasi-controlled, and they have specific ends. They release different kinds of energies. What's going on now does not share a lot of the same energies at the archetype level, but it does share some of the same descriptor sets. So let me be real clear about this. It's as though, how do I want to say it? It's as though the set that describes global rev, the revolution metadata layer, runs across entities at a horizontal situation where a global nuclear war or a third world war would be more of a vertical kind of a data split within the model space. So I truly do not think that the outcome of this will be a war that meets the definition of Third World War. It may well be a war in which, pretty much the whole populace of the planet is involved, but if so, it'll be at this horizontal level against the elite class. So in that sense, truly a planetary class revolution, something maybe new to the species. It sure seems that way.
Okay, great. Thanks, Clif. We've organized our questions in groups, and so we'll probably start off with the markets entity. First off is myself. Clif, you stated in Shape 9 that the dollar currency collapse is showing as reaching visibility within the mainstream media by March. What does your latest run say about potential bank runs and bank holidays? And also, what about precious metals and the $5 days and the $20 day?
The $5 and the $20 days are still, they've been long held sets, and they continued to grow throughout this last run in terms of supporting aspect attributes coming in under that. So that'll be where the break occurs. We'll get a $1 day, then we'll get probably another $1 day, another $50 or $1.50. Then we'll have a $5 day up in the price of silver, and then we'll have a $20 day up, and then all of a sudden we're looking at breaking new territory beyond $55 an ounce for it. And then it's going to be anybody's guess as to how rapidly it rises thereafter. However, that will be occurring disproportionately in different currencies, because really what will be going on is not a sudden revaluation of silver in everybody's mind. That will come later, but rather what will be occurring will be the initial breakdown of the currency structure. So here we're going to be faced with two waves, okay? On an emotional level, at an archetype level within precious metals, there were two distinct phases. One of the phases is the breakdown at a systemic level of the banking and then the currency relationships to each other at the same time. I didn't see them as being causally connected, but temporally linked. At the same time that global rev and the revolution metadata layer were rising, so is this other systemic breakdown in the derivatives and all things paper. But that really is not the panic to buy point. So that's the panic to buy point would be maybe 2 or 3 or 4 months after we saw this initial rise in the price of silver. And that'll be when the dollar death is pretty much an official or an accepted, at least, general consensus within the U.S. So there's going to be a lag time there. But the entities, the market entity, especially its relationship to the populous U.S. of A., using the global revolution that we've got going now, and we have to stop for a second and say on today there are demonstrations in Algeria and Tunisia and Egypt and Jordan and Yemen and Syria, and I think that was pretty much it in that band of the planet. There's also supporting demonstrations in a lot of different other countries, including some showing up in China. Those are always nasty because they have a tendency to turn into riots there as well. In any event, though, so we're seeing global rev rise. We're going to also see a situation where we're going to get a systemic breakdown between currencies. At some point in there, there's going to be some kind of a interest rate thing triggered or some gold to interest rate thing going, and derivatives are going to start to fail according to how the entity shapes up. And we'll see this $1 and then $1.50 and then $5 day and then a $20 day. And then at that point it starts to break, and there's like a little plateau period that goes on for, like I say, maybe 2 or 3 months, and then we hit a panic to buy, and it's from that point on that the value of silver actually is revalued in everybody's minds. In this initial phase, it'll just be a reflection of the markets as they revalue themselves in the systemic breakdown process. Does that make sense?
It does a little bit. Just a follow-up on that, Cliff. I think in a previous interview you mentioned that the markets might go up, actually, up to 20,000 until it became irrelevant. Do you have any language or information on when the markets actually become irrelevant?
The markets are going to become irrelevant when the value of a big chunk of the Dow, and that's also a meaningless kind of a thing because they shuffle that, but when a major index is worth the value, can be bought for the value of an ounce of gold. So when we get an ounce of gold equaling whatever the Dow is, then we know that the markets are at that point irrelevant. And that also occurred back in the previous depression, which was isolated in the 1930s, at that point to mostly the U.S. or North America. And at that point we had the Dow being able to be purchased by an ounce of gold, and it just kind of hung around for 25 years thereafter and didn't do much. So in terms of a date, I don't know. It'll depend on how rapidly things start to devolve. Because bear in mind, here's what we're looking at. We're looking at the same conditions that created the Great Depression in the 30s were led by a sudden shift in the price of wheat in late 1929. And we've just now had a concurrence, a repeat of that, with the sudden shift in the price of wheat, which was actually lagging a lot of the other food commodities. As these escalate, the pressures that are going to be put on the whole planet at an individual level will be felt daily, and it'll be expressed emotionally as in a huge form of a withdrawal that will probably take less than 30 days before there's a significant feeling of it. We may even be seeing it now in some areas, but it'll soon go mainstream where everybody is seriously stressed over the price of food. In the U.S., there will be shortages everywhere. Once we get to that stage, we're within 30 days of this major systemic collapse of the back-end paper system that supports the just-in-time delivery system. So you can actually look at the shelves in Walmart, Target, any of these major box stores that deal in food.